Hi everyone! For those of you who don't know me, I'm Anna Gargamelli. Unfortunately, I cannot join today because I'm completing job training in Connecticut. However, I have prepared a synthesis presentation on my essay, Beyond Death, the Evolving Depictions of the Afterlife. I have bad news for everyone. Most recent studies show that all humans die eventually. This is a simple fact of being alive. Less simple, however, is what happens after death. This age-old question has been speculated on by many great philosophers and religious groups. I would like to provide another lens to look at it: narrative fiction. Narratives take the abstract concept of the afterlife and provide a concrete description, offering insight not just to cultural beliefs, but also to the form of the story itself. This presentation explores the portrayal of afterlife in three texts: Homer the Odyssey, Dante's The Divine Comedy, and Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Each offer a unique perspective, mythological, theological, and existential, highlighting how each narrative uses the afterlife as a tool to reflect the cultural, moral, and philosophical concerns of the time. Imagine the world of the dead being just a walk through a grove and a river trip away. This is the Hades of Greek mythology, a physical place populated by the dead and a handful of gods that can be spoken to and interacted with. The underworld is introduced by Circe. You must travel down to the house of the dead, and the awesome one, Persephone, there to consult the ghost of Tiresias, seer of thieves, the great blind prophet, whose mind remains unshaken. Even in death, Persephone has given him the wisdom everlasting, to him vision alone. The rest of the dead are empty fleeting sacks. This passage emphasizes the underworld's physicality by using words such as travel down to and the capitalization of house of the dead. This underworld is populated by mythological figures and nameless spirits, creating a blend of recognizable characters and haunting anonymity. While heroes like Agamemnon and Achilles appear, even they are reduced to shadows of their former selves. The narrative function of Hades in the Odyssey is twofold. It ties Odysseus to a larger Greek mythology and serves as a narrative turning point in his journey. Imagine a world in which Medusa works a day job for Satan. That is the vision of hell that Dante sets up in the Divine Comedy. Unlike the shadowy and distinct Hades of the Odyssey, Dante's afterlife is intricately mapped, detailed, and governed by a rigid moral hierarchy. Hell is not only a physical place, but one with gates, levels, guardians, and punishments, all corresponding to sins committed in life. As Dante begins his descent, he is warned by the inscription over the gates of hell. Only those elements time cannot wear were made before me, and beyond time I stand. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. This chilling welcome immediately frames hell as eternal and absolute. The blending of theological judgment and real-world critique demonstrates how Dante's vision of the afterlife is as much a reflection of contemporary Florentine politics as it is of religious belief. In Inferno, the afterlife is less about personal transformation than about judgment, ideology, and the relationship between sin, power, and eternal fate. Kafka's The Metamorphosis offers a radically different interpretation of the afterlife, one that is metaphorical, existential, and grounded in modernist critique. Unlike Homer or Dante, Kafka presents no spiritual world, no gods, no punishment or redemption, only alienation and decline. Gregor's dehumanization is most painfully reflected in his sister's eventual rejection of him. Things cannot go on like this. Even if you two perhaps do not realize it, I most certainly do. I am unwilling to utter my brother's name before this creature, and therefore will say only, we have to get rid of it. We've done everything humanly possible to care for it and show it tolerance. Gregor is dead to his family. Even his sister who cared for him casts him aside and refuses to admit this creature could be her brother. His physical death at the end of the story is almost an afterthought. There is no mention of his soul, no reflection on what comes next. In this way, Kafka presents a vision of the afterlife as something experienced during life itself, a slow erosion of meaning and identity, in a world dominated by work and obligation. Kafka's depiction of the afterlife is not about divine judgment or heroism, but about the horror of a life unlived. The lack of spiritual framework reflects the disillusionment of the modern era, where the sacred has been replaced by routine and the soul by labor. One must imagine it is hard to organize thousands of dead souls. Across the three novels, there are differences in how each afterlife is structured and who is allowed to enter. In the Odyssey, Odysseus is able to visit the underworld, but it requires an elaborate ritual, and he is only allowed to stay briefly before being overwhelmed by the dead. In Inferno, Dante similarly doesn't belong among the damned, but unlike Odysseus, he has no time limit and can move freely throughout all the circles of hell. In Metamorphosis, however, the experience of the afterlife is much more personal and focused, with Gregor being the only character to experience his fate. One common thread across these works is the human protagonist does not belong in the realm of the dead. This creates the afterlife as a puzzling domain, a world apart from the living that humans can never truly enter. Another important aspect of the afterlife in these narratives is the role it plays within the plot. Essentially, the afterlife serves as a warning, either for the characters, the audience, or both. In the Odyssey, the ghosts act both as guides and a cautionary example for Odysseus on his journey. A clear example of this is the Agamemnon scene, where the ghost of Agamemnon shares the story of his death at the hands of his wife. This provides a cautionary parallel to Odysseus' own wife, Penelope. In Inferno, hell functions as a moral and religious lesson for both Dante and the audience, condemning contemporary political figures. It doesn't just serve as a warning for the living, but also reflects on the fate of notorious biblical and mythological figures. By placing contemporary popes alongside figures like Judas, Dante sends a powerful message to his audience about consequences of their actions according to his own view of right and wrong. In Metamorphosis, Gregor's afterlife critiques the soul-crushing nature of modern life, urging the audience to examine their own lifestyle choices. Gregor's exhausting work life, with little to look forward to beyond his job, is established early in the story, when even in his insect form he struggles to go to work. This serves as a warning to the audience not to spend their own lives working in a metaphorical purgatory, endlessly toiling without purpose. Understanding the purpose of the afterlife in these stories is crucial to grasping the narrative significance and the evolving role of the afterlife in literature. Communication in many ways represents power, so analyzing who is given a voice after death reveals much about each narrative's values and intentions. In the Odyssey, the dead can only speak once they have drunk from the blood-filled trench Odysseus prepares. However, not every ghost is granted this chance. Odysseus allows only mythological or personally significant figures to speak. This selective communication reinforces the Odyssey's focus on Odysseus' personal hero's journey, as only those who are relevant to his narrative are heard. In contrast, Inferno uses communication with the dead to build a broader political and moral commentary. Dante and Virgil encounter numerous souls across the circles of hell, and even when Dante doesn't speak directly to someone, Virgil steps in to explain and interpret the situation. This constant commentary transforms the journey into a platform for critique rather than just a personal quest. Meanwhile, in Metamorphosis, Gregor experiences the most tragic fate of all, complete silence. Unlike the characters in the other two works, Gregor cannot explain himself, seek empathy, or pass down his story. Even after his death, his family quickly moves on, erasing his existence without reflection. This stands in stark contrast to the other two texts, which allow the dead to speak and live on in memory. Kafka's portrayal offers a grim, nihilistic view of the afterlife devoid of legacy or meaning. Ultimately, how each narrative allows or denies communication with the dead speaks to both its spiritual worldview and its narrative aims, whether that be personal growth, moral critique, or existential despair. The final comparison point concerns the moral structure of the afterlife. You'll notice on these slides I do have tourism reviews for each afterlife. Enjoy reading those at your own pace. In the Odyssey, morality is not measured by sin, but by honor. However, even honorable mortals cannot ascend to paradise. Such a fate is reserved for the gods. This system reflects the ancient Greek religious worldview, where the afterlife offers little reward beyond mere existence. The absence of a meaningful, positive afterlife is one reason Christianity gains such a strong appeal. It promised salvation to even the average person. However, this inclusivity is counterbalanced by strict moral code. This includes everything from traditional fire and brimstones to mythological creatures like Medusa tormenting the damned, as depicted on this handy Inferno tourism map. Dante critiques this hypocrisy in the Divine Comedy, placing the corrupt religious figures deep within hell, exposing the political nature of morality in Christian institutions. Kafka, on the other hand, presents a wholly different kind of moral system in Metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa does nothing morally wrong, yet he suffers a grotesque transformation and eventual death. His fate is not a divine punishment, but the natural consequence of a life spent in dehumanizing labor. Kafka's afterlife isn't a religious concept at all. It's a satirical existential mirror. Whether it's based on honor, sin, or absurdity, each vision of the afterlife reveals deep cultural anxieties about what it means to live a worthy life. Readers today may engage with the ancient or religious texts outside their original moral frameworks, yet the internal narrative logic still holds power. By examining the logistics, treatment of the dead, and underlying moral systems in these texts, it becomes evident that the afterlife functions less as a static mirror of belief and more as a flexible storytelling device that evolves alongside the cultural and narrative needs of its time. If you have any questions on my presentation, feel free to pull me aside in the path or shoot me an email. Thank you for listening.